Our scripture comes from John 19, verse 30. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. This is the execution of the one who set so many free from the shackles that bound them to their sorrow and to their weeping. These lyrics come from The Weeping Tree by Joseph Martin. And it reads, "Upon the wind there comes a call, a whisper, soft and low, a lonesome cry that fills the night and echoes through the soul. It stirs the seeker tender heart. It bids them come and see, to kneel in shadow cast by grace, to touch the weeping tree. Against the sky the timers rise, a silhouette of grace, a rugged throne for heaven's own, the sinner's hiding grace. Its burden's arms reach out to all. They draw the world to see. The price of love is pain and blood upon the weeping tree. Oh, come to the place where promise lives and rest, where hope begins, where crimson leaves adorn the ground, a gift from graceful winds. Oh, come and walk the winding path that leads to Calvary. Come lay your burdens down and rest beneath the weeping tree. Come lay your burdens down and rest beneath the weeping tree." I often wonder what this moment was like. I wonder, as Jesus was in his last moments, what sounds could be heard. Was it sounds of weeping? Were there sounds of moaning? Were there sounds of laughter from afar? Were there birds singing and winging about, oblivious to what we humans were doing? Were there sounds of life beyond that hill? I wonder if it was an event such as we've experienced in our own history, of the days when we would drown women for witches or we would hang slaves. It was an event, and people gathered. There was games and fun because it was something there to attract people to see. It was entertainment. Is that what might have happened outside the very cross, but as people came to watch? Or I wonder if people ignored this hill, that they turned their backs and they turned their eyes, as we do ourselves when we walk past agony or we see pain. We avert ourselves and move along. We may not celebrate, but we don't engage. Maybe it was the place upon which you never cast your eyes. Maybe it was like today as I sit through the service and look out the doors and there's traffic going by, people walking by, trucks stopping, deliveries coming. Life goes on beyond this church, even as we are here, remembering these last 7 words. So I wonder what it was like. Was there activity in the marketplace? What did it smell like from the marketplace and from the homes and the people from around there? What might have been the last things that Jesus looked at with his eyes? What might have been the last thing he saw before his breath became air? I've been to Israel twice, and I've walked the Via Dolorosa, the path through the old city where Jesus walked to Golgotha. Today it's a vibrant marketplace filled with narrow cobblestone streets, mazes of roads that are twists and turns, vendors, shops, owners hawking their wares, their spices, food, clothing, jewelry, souvenirs of every kind for the curious tourist, houses of worship, and depending on which quarter you're in, it could be Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or Armenian. And we are familiar with some of the major sites in the Old City: the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, sometimes we know as the Dome of the Rock, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and with its history that goes back to King David. So I was quite surprised when I went there to see this narrow cobblestone way. And I'm not sure if it was exactly that way when Jesus walked that path. It was probably not likely this bustling business center and faith center that we see today. But it was the place of the temple of Jerusalem, whose steps were filled with vendors, as we know, selling things from their tables. So at some level, this would have been a vibrant community center. This is where the people came. This was the temple in the city of Jerusalem. Because of my time spent in the Old City, I try to imagine what was happening even while Jesus hung on the cross. While the Church of the Holy Sepulchre sits over the place where Golgotha once was, I try to imagine what it would have looked like from the different parts of the city. What would have been the last things Jesus would have been experiencing as he waited for death to come? As he hung and he waited for the release of death, did he reflect on the completion of his work in the world? Did he remember those he had loved, those who may still have been at the foot of the cross, those that loved him? Did he wait for his last breath to transition from this world to the next? Did he wait before his breath became air? When Breath Becomes Air is the title, actually, of a book written by Paul Kalanick. And it's his own story as he died from stage 4 lung cancer. And it's a reflection for him on what made his life meaningful and how life unfolded until the end, when his last breath became air. I'm certain, in one way or another, many of us have experienced a last breath. Likely of someone we love, I experienced my mother's last breath. We watched the breathing slow, the breaths becoming more and more shallow, until it was the last breath. It was finished, and the breath became air. Did Jesus consider his life filled with all that pain and horror and violence in those final hours? Did he still taste the sting of the violence and the sourness of the wine? We won't really ever know what these final moments of Jesus' physical human life might have been like. We'll never know what final thoughts closed his life as he uttered these critical words, "It is finished," and as his spirit was released to the one. While we try to ponder and imagine what this could possibly have been like, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the question for us, and it's most dear to us, is what did Jesus want us to know from his death, from this brutal and agonizing death on the cross? Jesus wanted us to know hope. Jesus wanted us to know, to acknowledge God's blessing. For this is the process to the resurrection in which we are certain. In the words of my friend and colleague, Reverend Chris Shelton, who is the pastor at the Broadway Presbyterian Church in Manhattan, writes, "The promise of the resurrection is this, that God's grace and mercy will always have the last word. The way of death has been and will be defeated, and that God is forever leading us to the day when we will finally lay down. Jesus' work in human form was finished. It was completed, and our triune God began to unfold what was and is to come in the wake of his death. This is the death that allows us to be blessed and allows us to hope." I want to close with a writing from the Circle of Grace, written by Jan Richardson. And she writes, "What abides for Good Friday? You will know the blessing. You will know this blessing by how it does not stay still, by the way it refuses to rest in one place. You will recognize it by how it takes first one form, then another, now running down the face of a mother who watches the breaking of the child she had borne, now in the stance of the woman who followed him here and will not leave him bereft. Now it twists in anguish on the mouth of the friend whom he loved. Now bears itself in the wound, in the cry, the finishing and final breath. This blessing is not in any one of these alone. It is what binds them together. It is what dwells in the space between them, though it be torn and gaping. It is what abides in the tear the rending makes. It is finished.